Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well. Hold on just a second while I sort out my audio here. Okay, thank you. Welcome back to the Roaming Prepper channel. I'm your host, Pete, and today I want to talk about a very specific scenario. We've spoken a lot recently about emerging threats in the geopolitical market, and these are very hard to prep for. Preparing for a hurricane, preparing for a tornado. Granted, tornadoes can come out of nowhere. um, there's a bit of I guess, a baseline where you should have water, food, meds, etc. When you start talking about geopolitical incidents, you start opening up, right? Hurricanes kind of do the same thing. They blow in, they flood, they knock lines down, people get electrocuted, they drown, and they get hit with flying things. Tornadoes, kind of the same thing, but it happens really abruptly. When we deal with geopolitical attacks, especially if the person or attackers are zealots in some way, shape, or form, you're dealing with people who are not necessarily acting in the rational sense that we in the Western world would think of. For example, I would not do something deliberately to cause myself harm. Most folks don't. I would not go and run into traffic. I would not go and try to detonate myself with some device because that's not what people typically do. But a lot of these folks, especially these young, disenfranchised um, individuals in a lot of these countries, when they get motivated to do those things, they can be very dangerous because they're not acting in a way that most people will compute. And when you're being attacked, if you were in an active shooter situation, that's not something a normal, rational person would do. And because it's not something we would do, people like all of us and the public will freeze. They won't know how to react because it doesn't make any sense. I don't know if I'm saying that the right way. And in doing so, they become subsequently become very often become the victims, and they become fatalities. Whereas someone who has actually thought, okay, I understand that this person will do this, it is not rational to me to behave like that, but I acknowledge that that person may behave in such a manner, and ergo I need to take a certain course of action. But again, when you look at the footage of, for instance, the Russian shooting, which sadly got taken down from my videos, you can clearly see these individuals were not completely chaotic. They were moving in a staggered column. They were covering left and right. The rear guy was actually turning around and checking their six. These guys were moving in a coherent way and murdering people for no reason. Or they had a reason, but they were killing civilians. But the civilians went to the floor and didn't move. Now, if you look at that original video, I'll try and find it and post it again. Um, there's one person off on the corner who gets shot, and he goes down. His friend is behind a pillar, but as the shooters move past, the one who was hit in the leg is on the floor, and he kind of curls up and kind of crawfishes, if you will, close enough for his friend behind the wall to reach out and grab him by the collar and pull him to safety. And then they both hunkered down. Now they had cover and concealment. Whereas other people hid behind a little, like, a vending uh, counter, but clearly it was not sufficient cover, and it didn't conceal them very well. And then these guys just basically walked up and caused harm. So the two scenarios, people have been talking about wars coming home. If something pops off, and this is just my personal opinion, if things escalate for whatever reason, it's not going to be obvious. It's going to be things like derailments. It's going to be explosions in factories. It's going to be accidents. It's going to be boats hitting bridges. Okay, I'm not saying this specific incident was or was not a terror attack, but those would be consistent with destabilizing and, if necessary, causing difficulty to your foe before you've actually shown your hand and said, "Hey, we're attacking you now," and helicopters and tanks go. We as a preparedness community need to understand and register when we see certain things what we may be dealing with, right? If you hear those shots, you don't just start running, you stop and try to evaluate if it's possible. What was that? Was that a shot? If so, where do I need to go? If you were on your game, you showed up at that building, you already kind of have an idea where the exits are. But these kind of situations are difficult. Now, there was an article in Yahoo uh, actually asking the question, could a October 7th attack happen in the US or in Canada or in the West in general? Well, it actually has. It's actually happened in France, the Charlie Hebdo attacks, and many of you remember that. Um, but I want to talk about two in particular. We're going to look at let me pull that up here. I want to look at the Mumbai attack in 2008, and then Charlie Hebdo happened in let me see if I can get the map up here, folks. Bear with me. I thought I had all the maps I needed, and clearly I was wrong. Um, Here we go. Okay. So we're going to look at these three incidents. If I can get the picture up here. Okay. So, first one I want to look at is the older one, which is um, the 2008 Mumbai attack. So let's walk through that real quick because I just want to give you guys a basis of what the heck it is that I'm talking about here. So, okay, so you look at this image, and I'm going to try and expand that a little bit for you. Okay, so you can see here. So, 2008 Mumbai attack, American David Coleman Hidley sentenced to 35 years in prison for his part. So, there was an American involved in this, which a lot of people did not know until much later. We all assumed it was just uh, Islamists, but no, it wasn't. There were other people. There was also a plot to attack a Danish newspaper, but it failed. But the way the attack went down was very interesting. So the individuals actually stole a fishing boat and then deployed from the water, and they hit, as you can see, multiple locations at one time. Let's see if I can expand that even more. Nope, I could not. Never mind. Uh, they attacked multiple locations. Wow, that's displays annoying. Okay, here we go. Um, Multiple locations at the same time using they were on foot, motorbikes, and I believe jet skis. So, Cafe Leopold, gunmen entered popular tourist hangout and sprayed bullets, killed 8. Taj Mahal Palace and Tower Hotel, 31 dead in 60-hour ordeal, shootings, bombings, arson. Nariman House was a Jewish cultural center, 6 hostages killed there. Um, they hit a hotel here, the Urbero Trident. Hostage taking lasted 42 hours, and then 2 attackers opened fire with Kalashnikovs through grenades on packed concourse. These attacks all happened almost simultaneously, and that is very difficult for any kind of response because the police, the responders, was police, military, law enforcement, they don't know where to start. So basically, they're getting reports, and imagine you're a call center dispatcher and somebody starts shooting Dallas during a football game, right? Dallas Cowboys are playing whoever, and there's a big fiasco of people everywhere, and you've got shooting by the stadium. Well, where is the stadium? If you've never been to one of these stadiums, they're massive. It makes it very difficult for the law enforcement to respond. Now, these guys used jet skis, they used motorcycles, and they were on foot, I believe, and then they stole cars as they went. They improvised. It made it very difficult to track. Now, the shooter in Odessa, Texas, and West Texas, they thought it was 3 shooters at one point because he had his vehicle, then he stole a car, then he killed a postal worker and stole that postal van and actually zoomed by cops before the cops realized the van that just passed him wasn't USPS. It was the bad guy, and they had to turn around, ultimately killing him in that vehicle. These types of attacks are very difficult. Um, You look at the way they hit multiple locations around the city. You look at Manhattan, you look at Los Angeles by the port, by the seaport. Imagine if you live out on the West Coast, LA, the beaches, or if you live in New York City, guys deploying from jet skis and they just go up on the beaches in Queens and Brooklyn, Coney Island, for instance, a bunch of tourists, and they just start smoking the tourists, right? Bunch of people on the beach. Um, Manhattan, they roll up to a dock in a small boat, get into the city, go to the South Street Seaport where you have all the tourists, walk to the World Trade Center where you have tourists, and they start engaging people. And then they pack up and leave. And that's what made Mumbai very difficult is these guys actually attacked something, then they stopped and they just went underground and they popped up 5 miles away doing something else. And that absolutely made the response difficult. Could something like that happen here? Absolutely, in my opinion. Now, let's look at another one. I want to look at the one more recent, which we're all very familiar with, the incident in Gaza. Now, again, n- we've all seen the footage, so I won't replay a lot of that. But you remember they came on damn ultralights over the fence. They came on motorcycles. They used trucks to take down the fence. These guys deployed about what 3,000 soldiers, and they hit multiple places at once. They actually overran a couple of army bases, small outposts, because the soldiers weren't sure what the hell was going on. And the next thing they knew, Hamas was trying to blow in the front gate, and now they were fighting like in their own barracks. A lot of Israeli soldiers died basically trying to defend their own base. Um, this kind of scenario is so difficult to deal with. And you look at a place like Manhattan, you look at a place like San Francisco. Let's take a look at Manhattan. And I pick on Manhattan because everyone knows New York City. But let me pull up a more generic map of, well, that's not a very good map in New York. That kind of sucked, actually. Bear with me just a second here. Uh, Manhattan map. We've already got a lot of people, many of whom are not supposed to be here in the first place, driving around on mopeds and motorcycles, stealing purses, and then they'll gang attack stores. We've already seen the gang attacks where they'll just basically flood a jewelry store, smash everything, and run off with the product. Um, Being able to counter something like that would absolutely make someone insane. So let me give you a map of New Manhattan real quick, and then we'll kind of conclude there. For instance, look at that. So obviously, those of you unfamiliar, all around this island is water. So you could have someone land or come up on the docks here on the south side. You could have someone go into the seaport over here. You could have another group come up here, someone come in here on the docks. They could even drive in through the different tunnels and bridges, and then in twos and threes, essentially attack the city, especially if they already have someone who's bought mopeds or dirt bikes and they've already staged them in the city. Because police will be in police cars or horseback trying to chase guys on motorcycles. The motorcycles can go between buildings, they can go between traffic and zip away. They just disappear into the city and then they pop up somewhere else. Um, these kind of attacks are absolutely viable. And with the introduction of hundreds of thousands, if not several million unknowns, the general population, if 1% of any population is criminal, you take 100,000, times point oh 0.01, that's 1,000 people, right? Just 100,000. We've got millions. But if only 1% are criminal, even worse, 1% are effective terrorists, that's 1,000 people. The Mumbai attack was executed with 10. 9/11 was under 30, 12 or 13 in the air, and then there's support people. Um, some of the worst terror attacks have happened with under 25 to 30 people. Imagine 1,000 all at one time. That to me is mind blowing. So, can this happen in the US? It's very viable. Do I think it'll happen? Had you asked me 4 years ago, I'd say probably low probability, but possible. Now I have it the other way around. I actually think it's a probability. At some point, with the provocations overseas, if our leaders don't get a diplomatic handle on things, someone's going to want to throw us for a loop so they can do something else. Whether China wants to take Taiwan, whether Israel and or Iran wants to hit Israel, but they don't want America to punch them in the eye, someone's going to do something here or in the West, in Europe, for instance, in such a way as to throw us off, delay our efforts to respond to something they're going to do overseas. And this is something we have to be aware of. Now, what do we do to prepare for that? That one, the 101 stuff, the food, the water, the meds, we already know that, right? But this is basic stuff. Um, Me personally, when I watched the way the Hamas attack was executed, how they were going through a subdivision and attacking houses, not attacking the streets, not attacking tourists, they were attacking civilians in their own homes. That really was a game changer in the way I perceived asymmetric threats in America. Normally, you think of things happening like that with a gang, right? The gang is doing a home invasion to steal your money. These guys could care less about money. They were there for blood. They were there to rape and kill and murder. And in these cases, giving them stuff doesn't matter, and fighting, which is probably your best option, may be your last option because that may be the last thing you do. So, how do you prepare for that? Well, first thing, reinforce your home. Now, obviously, not everyone has the money, time, or the design of home where you can make it into a fort, but you can do small things. For example, contractor screws and doors are very tiny. I've pulled all of them out and I've put 2-inch long screws for all my doors, front and back. Not just where the lock meets, but each screw in the hinges, both on the door side and on the frame side. I've also done that with the lock side as well. I have a deadbolts on front and back, right? Will it stop them? Eventually they'll get through, but you want to slow them down. If that kind of attack were to happen, the whole thing is to play for time. You want more time to make yourself as ready as you can to go to your room, go to the office, wherever you have to go to make your defensive preparations to protect your home and family or to evacuate your kids. You know, if they're kicking in the front door, send them out the back to the neighbors, whatever it is the situation demands. Another thing, locking and securing windows. Make sure your windows have good locks on them. Can they kick the windows in? Absolutely. But it's a pain in the ass. It's so much easier to just pop a lock, open the window, and just flip through as opposed to going through a bunch of broken glass. Don't make it easy for them. Lock your vehicles. As a matter of fact, I also recommend changing the screws and locking the door on the door to an attached garage. I have an attached garage in my current home. I didn't have it in my other home. It was detached. In this home, I actually put the 2-inch screws in the hinges and in the locks of the garage door. At night, I lock that as well because someone can break into my truck, hit my garage door opener, and gain access to the house through the garage. And 90% of the people I know don't lock the door between the garage and the house. I do because I know better. But these are kind of things you can do. I'd also recommend you may want to consider certain types of body armor if it's legal where you live. If not, you can also get a protective shield. I've seen one person do this. Um, it wasn't a ballistic shield, it was a protective shield. I don't know. They're trying to get around some kind of local ordinance. Anyway, it basically is the SWAT shield, but on a pedestal. And the person can put it in their bedroom and hide behind it and then use their firearm to, defend the door. Not very mobile, but it works. So, heck, you might even be able to make your own if you're a welder. I don't know. Little things to think about. You also want to consider escape routes, much like a fire escape. The house is on fire, you can only do so much. You got to get out eventually if you can't control it. Same thing, front door, back door, side window. Where will your family and kids go? If you tell the kids to run out the window and go, where are they going? You need to think about these things. If you have a neighbor or friend you trust who could keep an eye on the kids, if something were to happen and the kids can get out, you tell them, go to Joe's house or go to Sarah's house and hide there. These are the kind of things that we don't think about because the chances of them happening have always been very small. But if you look at the way these attacks are evolving, I think it's a much more serious threat now as we go into the future, but it's nothing we can't prepare for. And again, having firearms is great. Having a bulletproof vest, a plan, a secured house, and the firearms, so much better. In any case, ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave you with those thoughts. Uh, Run some scenarios, do some reading, and see what works best for you. Until next time, God bless, Godspeed. Y'all be safe out there. And remember, the more you prepare, the more options you have if things go sideways. God bless, and I will see you all later.